Schmicago, my god, hey everybody! For the last time! Honestly, I'm a little bit emotional. We have come to our last Schmicago recap of Season 2, and it's like the end of an era, a strictly 5-week era. But an era nonetheless. Yes, we have come to my final Schmigadoon Season 2 recap. And I have enjoyed sharing this time with you all. If I am sniffly throughout this, that's actually much more to do with hay fever than it is anything else. But the feeling is there. So if this is the first time you're seeing me, my name is Mickey Joe. I'm obsessed with all things theatre, and I have been so enjoying Season 2 of Schmigadoon, aka Schmicago, on Apple TV. A series that gives us all of the musical theatre references that we love. And I'm here to break them down for you and tell you which shows all of the many Easter eggs are coming from. That is the ones that I was able to work out, because I do not know all, so I'm relying on you in the comments section to let me know about any that I miss, as well as telling me what your favourite musical theatre reference was from this finale episode. Now, if you haven't seen my recaps of the rest of this series, I've had so much fun making them, and I briefly talk through what happened in each episode, give you a little bit of my thoughts as to the episodes, as well as for the most part explaining all of the many musical theatre references. And throughout this season, we have seen shows like Schmicago and Hair and Sweet Charity, heavy helpings of Sweeney Todd and Annie, with little side references to Funny Girl and Promises, and Godspell in there as well, and Pippin, and many, many more. Now, if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to subscribe to my musical theatre themed YouTube channel. I post reviews of all the shows that I've been to see, vlogs of me going to see the shows, and just about anything else that you can think of that is theatre related. So with no further introduction, let's talk about the final episode, episode 6 of Season 2 of Schmigadoon, aka Schmicago. Did that do anything? Did that move the hat? Why do they do that? What is it for? Who are they doing that for? So we open with a song in this episode, and not sung by the person we're expecting. We've had Titus Burgess introducing the last few episodes as our narrator character, giving you leading player from Pippin, and I've had a theory this whole time, because Ariana DeBose has been suspiciously absent from this season, even though almost all of the key players from Season 1 have returned for Season 2, some of them in a larger role. Looking at you, Jane Krakowski, thrilled to have you on screen. And so even though Ariana DeBose's star has been on the rise since her Season 1 Schmigadoon appearance, I'm talking about the Oscar win, Hello West Side Story, she hasn't been as prominently featured in Season 2, and I am assuming that scheduling is the reason for that she actually wasn't able to film that much, because what she has done in Season 2 has been these isolated little musical numbers that they basically could have filmed back to back over a very short window of her availability. And so what we get to open this episode is our third and final Ariana DeBose musical number, called Over and Done. And we are immediately getting Dreamgirls vibes, the way she is dressed, the way we have just her on a microphone with 3 backing singers behind her. It's Dreamgirls, but it's also just very Supremes. A little bit of the beat of the song and the introduction was giving me kind of I Know Where I've Been from Hairspray as well, but it's also nodding to It's Hard to Say Goodbye from the end of Dreamgirls. Towards the end of this song, Ariana sings No Way, No Way, No Way over and over again, which is nodding to another big moment from Dreamgirls when Effie is singing And I'm Telling You I Ain't Going. There's no way, there's no way. Side note, that moment is so iconic, it also gets referenced in 6. In this song, she is also singing It's Over. Is this also nodding to the moment that happens in Dreamgirls just before And I'm Telling You, the song It's All Over? It's all over. Now, I really want to think about this, because in Season 1, Ariana sang the song at the end of the finale that was indicative of the style we were going to move to. The whole first season was all classic Golden Age musical theatre, very Sound of Music, very Music Man. And then Ariana DeBose came in with this Godspell-esque song at the end of the first season that pointed us in the direction of where we were going to go. So her singing Dreamgirls in this one, is she again the indicator of the direction the show might be moving in if we get to Season 3? Who's to say? But after that lovely song, we have to carry on with the plot. So we had a cliffhanger ending at the end of the last episode. Melissa was taken away by the villainous Octavius Kratt in the back of his car. He announced his plans to marry her. He's kidnapping her to marry her against her will. It's very Judge Turpin and Joanna from Sweeney Todd. We already know he fits that role because he's already the villain in Alan Cummings' Dooley Blight Sweeney Todd parody story. But it's also a little bit Christine and Phantom, don't you think? Especially with Josh being the Raoul of this love triangle, who who is currently being held captive by Sergeant Rivera. So in this episode, we see Melissa, who is being coerced into signing divorce papers and a marriage license by Bobby Flanagan, who is also under the employ of Octavius Kratt, who has all of the money. Melissa throughout the season has been dressed in various different Barbra Streisand outfits from both On a Clear Day You Can See Forever and Funny Girl, and I can't pin down what this wedding dress is, but maybe someone else can. Let me know if you can work out if this wedding dress is referencing anything, because it's a very specific aesthetic. It's not a musical theatre reference, but what I love about this scene is how funny Cecily Strong gets to be in it as Melissa, and she's giving us a callback to an amazing season 1 gag where she says, "I shut down a dream ballet, I'm gonna shut down this," reminding us of the season 1 moment and the dream ballet that never quite was. Because the one thing us musical theatre people love more than a dream ballet is complaining about dream ballets. Let's all be real for a second, you know it, so do I. For what it's worth, when Kratt was about to sing his song, the introduction to it was very familiar of Joanna from Sweeney Todd, which Judge Turpin would not be singing. That would be sung by Anthony, but the vibe is there. We then cut to Josh, who is being held captive by Sergeant Rivera, and we come to find out through a little bit of dialogue that Sergeant Rivera is actually Octavius Kratt's nephew and is doing all of this in the hopes of getting his own act at the Kratt Club, which Octavius Kratt is consistently refusing to entertain the possibility of. It's hilarious to me that the whole insidious motivation behind this corrupt policeman is that he just longs for the stage. What else would someone's backstory be in Schmicago? I mean, come on now. Later in the episode, we'll find out that where Josh is being held is in the basement of a power plant, and we do see a bunch of, like, furnaces or boilers behind him. I don't know things about science, but something to that effect. Which is giving me, again, a nod to Sweeney Todd and the final scene of Sweeney Todd that does not end well for Mrs. Lovett, or really anyone in Sweeney Todd. No one particularly gets out of that musical well, but specifically the existence of the furnaces is reminding me very much of that moment. Now, speaking of Mrs. Lovett, we then cut to Miss Codwell and Dooley Blight. He is returning, having failed to kill Octavius Kratt and determined to slaughter an orphan instead. She has been fattening up the orphans, but when this happens, she instinctively protects them. We saw this in the last episode. She started to have a slight change of heart when the orphans presented her with a gift. And when Dooley Blight challenges her to prove that she is really enamored with him, she gives him an enormous kiss, and he references a song from Sweeney Todd by saying, "God, that was good." Of course, we're referencing God, That's Good. We then get the most hilarious romantic scene between these two where they go back to a boudoir together and he uses the meat cleaver that seems to never leave his hand to cut off her clothing, and then they have a lovely adult liaison with each other. We cut to the end of this, thank God, where we have the orphans knocking at the door to check that she is okay. Their concern that that man might be harming her is very not while I'm around. And then, keeping on this strange theme we found ourselves in, we cut to Topher and Jenny Banks, who are waking up in bed together. As a reminder, this is Aaron Tveit and Dove Cameron playing their Hippie and Sally Bowles characters respectively. You'll notice Dove Cameron's British accent as Jenny Banks is starting to fade slightly as her character is getting a little bit more Americanized and modernized by her association with Topher. They also have some great lines about him pondering whether there's more that he could learn about what they just did, and her insisting that yes, there definitely is. But not before his tribe enters, truly killing the buzz, but with some pressing news. They stopped following him in the previous episode because they didn't feel like he had enough time for them, but they do get a great line in here where they say, "At least you're still getting naked," this being the mantra of this hair and Godspell inspired group of hippies. Gotta get naked. And there's another great line in here. There's this running joke that they love Josh, but they're just completely indifferent to Melissa, and they literally say here, "We obviously don't care about Melissa, but they care enough about Josh to encourage Topher to help them to rescue him from captivity." Meanwhile, Josh is trying to escape capture himself by telling Sergeant Rivera a series of parables, and he is telling so many back to back, trying to plead with him, and he starts to call on topical film references, and this is reminding me of another musical theatre character who makes up biblical stories and puts in topical film characters. I'm talking about Elder Cunningham when he is making things up again at the start of the second act of the Book of Mormon. It's very much not of the time period we've been parodying, but the vibe of that moment feels unmistakably similar. Thankfully, he doesn't have to keep at this for too long because Topher and the hippies rush in to save him, allowing Aaron Tveit the chance to apologize for the outburst he made in the previous episode when he parodied Jesus Christ Superstar's The Last Supper lyric, "A Jaded Mandarin," by calling Josh a sour macaroon. And he says here, "A sour macaroon? I don't even know what that means." And honestly, that may have been my favorite reference of the entire series, you guys. I'm going to put it out there. That was a gift to the musical theatre kids. They didn't have to give us that, but they did. Then, not to be left out, Dooley Blight gets involved and bursts into the basement as well, whereupon we basically have a family reunion because we remember that Dove Cameron's Jenny Banks is his estranged daughter. An admission of guilt from Sergeant Rivera allows the two to tenderly reunite, and I believe it's Alan Cummings' song from season 1 of Schmigadoon that he sang as Mayor Menlove that underscores this hug moment. It's definitely a familiar melody. But it's not all going well because we cut to the wedding of Melissa and Octavius Kratt, and don't think I didn't notice how the cinematography introduced this moment. We are panning down from a crystal chandelier, giving you major Phantom of the Opera vibes. How does Phantom of the Opera end? With Christine in a wedding dress and the Phantom having trapped her in his lair and Raoul trying to come to her rescue but being restrained. That is so the exact setup that we have right now. But ultimately, this scene ends in the best way possible. Dooley Blight throws his meat cleaver. It doesn't hit Kratt, but it does impact the floor and get his cape stuck to the floor. Meanwhile, Kristen Chenoweth's Miss Codwell overhead cuts down the chandelier, which falls. Kratt, being unable to flee from the space, is impaled and killed by it. Which of course is referencing the Phantom of the Opera. If I had a light fitting above me, I would drop it right now just because of how satisfied I was with that moment. Can I do it with a ring light? And just to really labour the point, we have a little bit of a nod to that Phantom of the Opera theme underneath. Not too close of a nod so we don't get sued, because Andrew Lloyd Webber himself got sued for that theme being too close to something else. Like, there's just... honestly, music is very incestuous. When the assembled crowd asks Melissa if Kratt is really dead, she, being a physician, goes and takes his pulse, and then rather than saying anything, she reprises the episode 1 song Kaput, and we all sing a little bit about his villainy and how it has now ended because he's totally died. When we first saw Kaput, it was very much a nod to Mein Herr, with Dove Cameron performing the iconic chair choreography that Liza Minnelli did in the film. This time around, Jane Krakowski, seeing a chair nearby, has her leg up on that chair and is giving you a visual reminder of that. And we have our final incarnation of the running gag of the season, the "I'll drink to that lady." Now, it seems that we're not going to get the deliciousness of the conspiracy theory that we'd been hoping for, because she isn't revealed to be Dooley Blight's wife, who is in fact dead. She is just a lady who will drink to that, and she's out here living her best life, turning up at weddings and trials, but she is as happy about the death of Octavius Kratt as anyone else. And we then finally get our happy ending, and we get to check in with all of our characters, who are given really satisfying solutions to their arcs. I will say my favourite being Sergeant Rivera's, who finally gets to perform his act on stage at the Crack Club. And guess what? His act is an obvious reference to the Rocky Horror Show. He is dressed all like Frankenfurter and rocking it, by the way. Honestly, love that journey for him. Very excited. Is this yet again a nod about where the next season may be going? Who's to say? But Josh and Melissa have done what they needed to do in order to be able to leave. They have brought about a happy ending. But where everyone is assembled where they were at the beginning of the season, Titus Burgess, as our narrator character, asks them why they would want to leave Schmicago. And as he begins to burst into song, we have some underscoring that is exactly the same as the end moments of Pippin, when the leading player sings, "Think about your life, Pippin," trying to convince Pippin into one final act of showmanship and glory. Now, I want to talk about that final scene of Pippin because the leading player is not necessarily to be trusted in the show and is not necessarily guiding Pippin with Pippin's best intentions at heart. Pippin ultimately decides to reject the suggestions of the leading player and all of the troupe and the direction in which the show has been heading in order to live an ordinary life. And this is what Josh and Melissa seem to be moving towards as well. They are rejecting the musical flair of Schmigadoon and Schmicago to return to the comparatively ordinary world that they originally came from. But that's not the only scene we're referencing, with all of these characters trying to impart pieces of advice to them as they're trying to make up their minds. It's also very familiar of the moments before being alive in company. And we even get a direct reference to that because Jane Krakowski's Bobby Flanagan says, "Add 'em up, kiddos," which is a line from Company. Somebody says, "Add 'em up, Bobby. Add 'em up," as he is beginning to sing Being Alive, but before he's really come to his turning point conclusion. Josh and Melissa then finally sing together a song that seems to be called I Want More. It's a reprise of the song that Aaron Tveit and Dove Cameron sang together a few episodes back, and functionally it does the same thing that the final song of Pippin does. They decide that they want to return to their ordinary life together. When Titus points out that there are going to be more bad days than good days, and Melissa says, "Isn't that the whole point?" it feels very much like a Being Alive moment. And with her coming to this realization, we have the return of Martin Short as the Leprechaun, who confirms that they have passed whatever strange test it was that they were having to endure, and that they will now be able to leave. We also discover that Titus Burgess is done being a narrator. I mean, he was getting increasingly exhausted by the demands of his job, and he decides that he wants love, and he is going to fall in love with Sergeant Rivera, who is not against it, and I am absolutely thrilled for them. Titus is then immediately replaced by a female narrator who emerges from the crowd and narrates Titus no longer being the narrator, which is hilarious and also clever, because Titus was very familiar of Ben Vereen's original leading player character from Pippin, and when that show was majorly revived on Broadway, the role was gender swapped and we had a female narrator for the first time, and that's exactly what has happened in this moment. They're nodding to the history of the show's casting. Clever. Meanwhile, it turns out there are actually two Martin Short leprechauns, and their names are Oscar and Steve. Of course, Oscar Hammerstein II and Stephen Sondheim. Surely the inspiration for these leprechaun names. I don't know why leprechauns have to be named after those two phenomenal lyricists who had this tremendous mentor-mentee relationship with each other, but I'm not against it. And it's time for our very last song of the series, A Happy Beginning. And it's this nice, charming little ukulele song. I can't place it from any specific musical theatre moment, certainly not from any of the shows or the era that we have been looking at so far, but I also can't seem to place it of anything that we might be moving forwards towards. I have since read a little snippet of an interview where Cinco Paul, the composer, talks about a major inspiration for this song being the Muppet movie song Rainbow Connection, a beautiful song that I love. And even if we're not putting an Easter egg in the final moment or teasing where we might be going next, I love that it's just this nice, fulfilling song, and we get to see Josh and Melissa returning to the real world. We get to see Melissa pregnant. They're expecting their first child together, and there's this beautiful shot as we are zooming out over Manhattan, and what was this grey world is slowly blooming into colour. This is presumably a reference from some sort of movie musical, but I regret I cannot tell you which one it is, so I need your help for our final reference of the series. What shot was this referencing? I'm sure I've seen it before. Somebody will remind me in the comments section. But that was everything that happened in the last episode of Schmicago. I enjoyed this episode. It tied everything up. I like where it took all of these characters. I like that we got one last little Ariana DeBose moment. I had been missing her in this season. And I feel like we got everything out of these shows from this era that we were going to. I would like a little bit more Phantom. We just started to tease Phantom, but strictly speaking, that's an 80s musical, and we really hadn't arrived at the 80s yet. So I'm wondering if the inclusion of Phantom, again, is more about the direction we might be heading in. Certainly, if there was another series of Schmigadoon, I would expect to be seeing some of those 80s musicals. You'd have to have Les Mis, you'd have to have Phantom. I think everyone got great characters this season. Everyone gave great performances. Standouts for me, I think Dove Cameron did a fantastic job, and Jane Krakowski, episodes later, I'm still not done thinking about the number that she did in the courtroom, Bells and Whistles. The whole of the soundtrack of the second season has been dropped, and the songs I'm most excited to go back and listen to, Talk to Daddy and the Gotta Get Naked song, those are the ones that have been just rigidly in my head this entire time. But also that Bacharach Promises number that we had in the last episode. But I really enjoyed this season. I think I definitely preferred it even to season 1. I think more of the references really hit home for me in this season because it was more shows that I knew and more shows that I really love. I'm a huge Sondheim lover, so anything from Sondheim I'm always bound to enjoy very much. But I also think there were just more references in this season. I think in season 1 there were a few episodes where we would only get a couple, or each song was really just teasing one moment, and here we had so many that were layered with all of these different references, and you could tell they were just having so much fun writing them, which made them fun to watch. And I hope that you enjoyed watching them as well, and I hope you've enjoyed watching my recaps of these episodes. I've enjoyed making them and spending this time with you all. Thank you so much for watching this week's recap of the season finale of Schmigadoon Season 2. I hope there is a Season 3 so I get to make more of these videos, but in the meantime, let me know what other content you want to see on my channel down below. Make sure you're subscribed. If you would like to be a channel member, hit the link in the description. I hope that everyone is staying safe and that you have a stagey day. For 10 more seconds, I'm Mickey Joe Theatre. Oh my god, hey. Thanks for watching, have a stagey day. Subscribe!